So far in our code examples, we have been using the const and let keywords to declare our variables. This is the modern way of declaring variables in JavaScript and what you would want to use moving forward, as opposed to using the var keyword. The simplest way to understand when to use const versus let keyword for your variables is if you have data that is never going to change, such as a social security number. You can use the const keyword to declare those type of variables. When you want to have data that may change, such as age, in this example, this is when you would use the let keyword. To further illustrate why you would want to use const and let over var as your variable types, we will look at a few scenarios. In this scenario, I have a print job function, and inside of it, I have a code block, and I've declared a variable job set equal to engineer. And then I want to console.log job inside the code block, and then I want to console.log job outside the code block. So what I expect is that whenever I run the code that I see engineer logged to the console twice. So let's see what happens. And I do see engineer logged to the console twice. The reason why is because variables declared with the var keyword are function scope. So what that means is that this variable job is accessible anywhere inside of our function. Now I'll change up this example by using the let keyword to declare our job variable. So now what will happen is when we attempt to run this code, an error will be thrown because we're trying to access a block scope let variable outside of the code block, which we cannot do with const and let variables, unlike the var keyword variables, which we can access from anywhere inside of our function scope. And you see the error is cannot find named job, which is our attempt to console log job of line 6. In this scenario, I have a variable run code block, which is set to true. And since this variable is true, when we evaluate it in our if statement, it allows this block of code to run. Inside, I have a first name variable set equal to Scott that's declared using the var keyword. And then I redeclare the same variable, except this time I set it equal to Mary. And then I update the first name variable to Sarah. And after that, I console log it on line 8. This code will work because we're using the var keyword. And the var keyword allows you to redeclare a variable inside of the scope. And it also allows you to update the data inside of the variable. So if we run our code, Sarah is console logged as expected. Now we'll change it up. We'll delete line 5 and we'll use the let keyword. So now we've declared a variable first name using the let keyword. And if we try to redeclare it, then our linter automatically lets us know that there's an issue. And it says cannot redeclare a block scope variable first name. So when using the let or the const keywords, we're not able to redeclare the same variable inside of the block of code in which it was declared. However, using the let keyword, we are able to update the value. So we can say first name equals a different string value of Sarah. And we can console log it in and overrun. The last thing we'll look at is what if we use the const keyword to declare a variable. When we try to update our first name variable to a different value, our linter is letting us know that this cannot be done as it is a constant. And if we try to run our code, we'll get an error that says the same thing, cannot assign to first name because it is a constant. In this scenario, I'm using the same code from a previous scenario. However, with this example, I'm console.logging the first name variable on line 4 before it's declared on line 5. And because we're using the var keyword, this code will actually run. And the result is undefined. The reason why is because var variables are hoisted to the top of their scope before execution. So what happens behind the scenes is JavaScript will declare it and set it initially to undefined. If we change our example, instead of using a var keyword, we use a const or let keyword, and we attempt to run the code, we'll get an error. And it says reference error, cannot access first name before initialization. The reason why we get an error when we use our let or const keywords is because they are not hoisted to the top of the scope like the var keyword is. Until these variables are initialized, meaning set to a value, they're set to be in the temporal dead zone, so we cannot access them before they are actually initialized. In this example, I have a variable I declared using the var keyword that's set to the value of 24. And then we have a for loop with the variable I that's initially set to 0. And as long as I is less than 5, then we'll increment the I after we console log the current value for I. So you would think that console logging I on line 7 will give us the value of I on line 1. But what actually happens is that we get the value of I from our for loop after all the iterations are completed. And that value is 5. Now if we change our for loop to use the let keyword instead of var, and we save and rerun, then we get the expected behavior where our console log I value is 24. And it's because of our block scoping that prevents our let version of the I variable from being accessed outside of this block of code here. In this example, we're using a for loop to iterate over our I variable, and we're using the set timeout function to console log our I variable after 1 second. So you think it would simply console log the current value of I after each second. But that is not the case because we're using the var keyword. What we get is the value 3 logged to the console 3 times. And the reason why is because since we're using the var keyword with our set timeout function, set timeout is not given the current value of I after each second. Set timeout is essentially going to have to wait until all iterations of the var variable are completed in our for loop, and then it's given the final value, which is 3, because 3 is not less than 3, and that stops the for loop. And then that version of I is given to our console.log in our set timeout. If we change our code to use the let keyword, then our code behaves as expected. So now we get 0, 1, and 2 logged to the console. So because we're using the let keyword, we'll initialize a new variable I for each round of our for loop. And so that version of I will be sent to our set timeout function, allowing us to print out the expected code. So in summary, we learned that in modern JavaScript, you want to use the let keyword for data that can change, and we want to use the const keyword to hold values for data that is constant and will not change. We also looked at a few scenarios to help illustrate the differences between const, let, and var, and why you would want to use const and let as your variable keywords over var.